Hello there once again, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation and packing for walking El Camino de Santiago, as well as tips, tricks and hacks to make your journey along the way a lot more enjoyable. This week we have the lovely company of an American pilgrim from North Carolina, Asheville to be precise. Rebecca Weston has walked the Camino Frances twice, the Camino Portuguese, portions of the French route from Le Puy all the way to Saint-Jean-Pierre-de-Port. Rebecca has also been a hospitalera in an albergue with no electricity, no hot water, so lots of stories to tell, and is also a local member of the American Pilgrims Association. Try that again. Association in Asheville, North Carolina. Rebecca, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
Thanks for your time this morning and in my afternoon. Okay. Anyway, so we always like to start the podcast by asking why you first decided to walk the Camino de Santiago. And please feel free to tell us the story. We're sat around the campfire in Finisterre and it's our last night. We're all going to go home. And feel free to let us in on the secrets.
Sure. Well, back in the year 2000, Shirley MacLaine, who's an American actress, wrote a book or published her book about the Camino de Santiago. I didn't know much about her, but I happened to catch a morning news program where she was being interviewed about this book she wrote about this walk. And I thought it sounded really interesting. And I kind of filed it away. And then in January 2011, I decided I was going to take 1 year off from working, decided to sell a lot of my stuff and the lease on my apartment, take off and do some things I'd wanted to do. And so the Camino was the culmination of that. It had been filed away at that point for 10, 11 years in my memory, but I still remembered it, still wanted to do it, and finally had the time and some funds to be able to do it. So I went off and took off on my first Camino in May of 2012.
My question that I've got from all of that is, why did you decide to sell up everything?
I am a big fan of simple living and minimalism, and I just feel like it makes me more mobile. I like to experience different places around the world, and so I just felt like I had more stuff than I needed. So, and I wasn't going to have an apartment anymore to store my stuff, and didn't want to store too much at my parents' house. So it was just easier to go through and say, hey, I don't need this anymore. Does somebody else want it? Plenty of stuff I gave away in addition to the things that I sold. So yeah, it was just a decision to make things easier.
And how has that worked out for you as the decade has gone on? Have you still managed to maintain that minimalist living, or has it become more difficult?
It's become a little bit more difficult because in the successive years, I eventually got married. We bought a house. I still teach a decluttering class and I help people declutter their lives. So I try and, of course, do it in my own home as well. But it's a little more challenging when I'm not moving around as much as I used to. It's a lot easier to go through all your stuff and get rid of things when you move, as opposed to when you're staying in the same place for multiple years. So yeah. Still a work in progress.
Well, I'd like to quiz you a bit more about that way of living a bit later on, actually, because I'm very interested in that myself. And I'm sure many of the people that do pilgrimages where we live very minimally as well, that could be an education for us as well. Pique a lot of the listeners' interest. So 2012, you took off after reading Shirley MacLaine's book. You said filing that away for quite a while, but the seed was planted, and that first one you did was the Camino Frances?
It was, yes.
Okay. And imagine you were about to go and do another Camino tomorrow. What would be the first three things you take with you?
I would say the first thing would be my journal. I love writing about my experiences, and in fact, I have the best record of my experiences. The mornings on my first Camino, I would get up, and before I even got out of bed, I would turn on my headlamp, but the red light setting, which doesn't wake other people up. And I would write in my journal for 3 pages before I even got out of bed. So because I found if I wanted to do it later in the day, I'd feel like I was missing out on something. So anyway, journal would be number one. Number two would be moleskin. For those that don't know, it's something that you put on to cover your hot spots before they become blisters. So I would bring that. And number three would probably be gloves, because if I should say, if you're walking in May or September, because it gets cool in the mornings, and I was using my hiking sticks and my fingers would get really cold if I didn't have my gloves on in the morning. So those would be my three things.
Good stuff. Okay, so journal, and I like your approach to journaling there, where you said you do it in the morning, so you didn't feel like you were missing out on some of the socializing in the albergues after everyone had finished walking. That's a really good idea, actually. I'm not sure my brain would work that early in the morning, but maybe the red light can kind of help wake you up. The moleskin, which is for blister prevention, and the gloves, because I think at any time of the year it can get cold in the mornings, especially if you're walking before the sun comes up. So great stuff there. And I know you were hospitalera at the Albergue in San Anton, which is, I think that's the place where, if I'm not mistaken, in the kind of the beginning of the Meseta, just after Burgos, where it's just basically Roman ruins.
It is, yeah. It's 40 kilometers after Burgos, and almost every day I was there, we'd have at least one person staying with us who walked from Burgos that very morning, which is way more than I would want to walk in a day. But yeah, it's an amazing place. It's just before you get to Castro Jerez. It's just a few kilometers before that. People will definitely notice it because there's a huge arch over the Camino. Not everybody realizes you can stay there. There is a sign that says Albergue, and you have to kind of go around the building. And I would encourage people, even if you're not going to stay there, follow that sign, because it can take you right inside. You can actually go inside the ruins, even if you're not staying there. And we would welcome people there throughout the day to just come and be in that space. And sometimes, pilgrims sometimes would show up at 10 in the morning and spend a good bulk of the day with us. And then they'd keep walking on at like 3 o'clock in the evening, or they'd decide to stay with us. But it's an amazing place to both just to visit and also to stay.
For anyone that might be interested in becoming a hospitalero or a hospitalera, how did you go about applying and making that happen?
I did it a little differently than most people do. Traditionally, most people take a course, a Hospitalero course. They're offered in different countries around the world. And like the American Pilgrims on the Camino offers one. I know there's one offered in Canada and South Africa, Australia. So traditionally people take that course, and then that allows you to be put, from what I understand, you can apply to the Spanish Federación to work in some of the albergues that are part of the Federación, which are the donativos. But for San Anton in particular, when I was doing it, there was one woman in particular, Rebecca Scott, who I think people have mentioned on your podcast before, who was at that time in charge of getting hospitaleros for San Anton and for another albergue. She's not doing that anymore. There is someone else in charge. So in addition to the traditional way, there are untraditional ways. So Rebecca is also able to train hospitaleros in real time at her, where she also lives on the Camino and accepts people to stay where she lives through different times of the year. And I was at San Anton, and so did my training kind of in the moment there before volunteering. So.
Okay, so the traditional route would be to contact the American Pilgrims on the Camino for those that are in the USA, and to search, I guess, wherever you are in the world, you would kind of search the corresponding organisation to where you are. So thanks for that. We're going to circle back as well to your experience as a hospitalera in an albergue that had that had no hot water and no electricity, because that definitely is categorized, I think, could be classified as minimal living for sure.
Absolutely.
But I mean, had you ever done anything like this before? Just gone walkies across a country, or gone for long distance hikes like this?
No, not at all. I didn't consider myself athletic. I didn't consider myself a hiker. I started practicing a few months before, just walking and tracking my steps on a pedometer. But most of the stuff I brought with me was either bought used, or borrowed from friends, because I was like, I'm doing this once and then never again, because this is not my thing. I'm not athletic. I don't do this. And here I am, having done numerous Caminos at this point. But no, I was not in any physical kind of shape hiker or anything like that.
So I wonder if there was maybe a mistake you made on your Camino, one of your first Caminos, and were you to meet someone right now who was going to do their first Camino, you'd say, don't make this mistake.
Absolutely. And that would be trying to keep up with people that are going quicker than you feel is your pace. Some people, when you're walking with people and they're going quicker than you can do that for a little bit and it keeps you going and stuff. But if you try and push too hard, especially too soon, your body's not ready for it. If you're in a state like I was, where you weren't into that kind of stuff beforehand. And so I did try and keep up with some folks early on and thankfully very quickly realized, you know what, no, this is not how I want to do my Camino. I'm not a fast walker. I'm not going to do 30K in a day normally. I do, 12 to 15 miles a day, 20 to 25K. So I would say that would be my advice. Like, fine if you do get into a crowd that you walk with, and that's great. But I do know a lot of people who have also gotten into a crowd and in order to keep up with those folks did their Camino a lot quicker and felt like they didn't get to see what they wanted to see, or felt like they were walking someone else's Camino and not the one that they had wanted to do. So just to be aware of that.
And were there any consequences of you trying to keep up with people that you didn't necessarily feel like you could or wanted to?
Yeah, I got injured. It was early on. It must have only been like my third or fourth day. I woke up and I was in a top bunk and I put my, I can't remember if it was my left or right foot on the ladder to go down to the ground. And this pain shot up the back of my heel. And I immediately lifted it up and got back up onto the bed and was like, what was that? Made my way down eventually and could hardly walk on that foot for the pain. And so realized right then, well, I can't keep up with everybody because I don't even know if I could walk today. The only guy that was still left in our room, because that morning I had decided I was not going to get up and do the rush anymore and try and get out quickly in the morning. I was going to write in my journal. I was going to do my stretches, blah, blah, blah. So by the time I got out of bed or got off of my bed, I should say, I was packed up and stuff. There was only one guy left, and he had walked from Le Puy, and he told me about a day where he had to stay in a tiny, tiny town for like a couple days healing. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I hope that's not the case here. And he said, well, I'm going to have some breakfast here before I start my walk. Why don't we go to breakfast together? And we walked out, and there were a couple other people there who had also decided the same thing. They were not doing the early morning rush anymore. They were going to take their time. And they were people that I'd met along the way. And there were maybe 6 or 7 of us that went to a little cafe and had our breakfast. And I got different advice from different people. I was trained as a physical therapist initially. I don't do that anymore. So I was pretty sure what I had was just a really tight Achilles tendon, and I stretched it out. The French guy gave me some sort of natural spray. Somebody else told me to take some ibuprofen. So did a bunch of things and just kind of gently walked around the cafe and got to the point where I felt like I could walk it, but just at a very slow pace. And so when everybody left, I said, go ahead, guys. I'm not going to be able to keep up with you. And it was really sad because they were people I had gotten to know over those first couple days. And I was really anxious about not having those people around anymore. But it turned out very well in the end, but I ended up running into them eventually. The Camino kind of works out, but it was a definite wake-up call early on.
Yeah, and I think that echoes the advice we've heard on some episodes before. Just don't do too much too soon. It sounds like you had a bit of a repetitive stress injury from doing that. And if that does happen, like you did, have a rest and take some baby steps back onto your Camino and go at your own pace. So thanks for sharing that story. Lots of takeaways there and really good advice as well. We've already heard about some of your foot care tips, which would be the moleskins, carrying the moleskins with you. Mm-hmm. So from a low moment in your Camino, what about a high moment? Your favourite albergue, one you'd recommend?
Well, it'd have to be San Anton.
Tell us all about it. There we go. I knew we'd get back there in the end.
Yeah, San Antonio, it's not for everybody, but I love it because it doesn't have electricity or hot water. So that means there's no Wi-Fi. That means people that are staying there
Yes.
talk to each other. They sleep, or they write in their journals, or they just kind of roam around the area. And it's just very peaceful. It's a very calming space in general. I mean, to actually spend half a day, a night inside the ruins of a church is just an experience. I don't know too many places in the world. I don't know every place in the world, but I don't know too many places you could necessarily do that. And then the atmosphere among the pilgrims, and also with the hospitaleros there, I've had some great experiences staying there also as a pilgrim. There's always a dinner and a breakfast. It is a donativo, which I would definitely tell people. Donativo does not mean free; it means by donation, and your donations definitely help to keep things running. And in our case, we don't have to keep the lights on, but we did have to every day. Myself or the other hospitalero would go in and get food for the next night and stuff. But I did love that we would sit around and have that community meal together. Breakfast in the morning is by candlelight because it's dark at the time when you're first waking up. It's just an incredible experience. And again, like anybody that gives advice on where to stay, it's not for everybody. You'll know if it's for you at that time. The first time I did my Camino, I did not stay there, but I knew eventually I'd come back, and I did.
What was that like, being without electricity?
Uh,
And how long, if you've mentioned this already, I apologize, I might
yeah,
have
no.
missed it, but how long were you there as hospitalera?
18 days I was there as hospitalera.
So what changes did you see in yourself, in your thoughts, in your disposition, how you felt living without electricity, living like that, compared to having phones going off and TVs on and
I
yeah.
just felt a lot calmer. It was a slower way of living that I really enjoyed. I will confess that when either one of us walked into Castro Harith each day to get the food, we might also stop at a cafe and have a coffee and maybe check on the internet, and, email my parents, say I'm still alive, that kind of thing. So it wasn't that I was completely without it. I was without it when I was at San Anton, but part of the job of being a hospitalero is to go into town so that you can provide for the pilgrims. But yeah, regardless, most of my time I was, at San Anton welcoming people. I wrote a lot more, had a lot more time to reflect, just a much more slower way of life.
And that's obviously hard to sustain when you're doing when you have a 9 to 5 job or a conventional job. Are you still able now to incorporate that kind of detox into your life?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I have a friend that has a 400 square foot home that he has offered that I can go stay in, and it doesn't have internet, and has electricity, but no internet except in a common space for the whole community. And so I'm actually preparing to go there over the next week. So sometimes I do get these great opportunities, and I've also tried every once in a while to leave my phone, not have it on me, leave it in my car, leave it at home when I go out, just to have that constant checking kind of thing turned off.
Just checks all the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very
yeah,
tiring cognitively. It's really really tiring, I think,
it
and
is.
I have a very love-hate relationship with my mobile phone. That's for sure. And I've said to my wife on many occasions I want to get rid of it, and I'm resolving to for sure. And in terms of the pilgrims, did you see a change in the pilgrims that came to stay? How would they make that adjustment?
Most of them, quite a few of them said when we said, no Wi-Fi, so no electricity, no hot water, they said, "Oh, so it's like camping." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I guess so." Except they said, "But I don't have to feed myself." I said, "No, we're going to cook for you." And they said, "Oh, well, even better." So the people that chose to stay there, really it was something that appealed to them, and the comments I got were similar to what I was saying. Like, it was just nice to stop and just to not have any of that available, and to slow down. So changes I saw, I didn't know the pilgrims that came until they showed up there with us. But I did have some people that would come earlier in the day, as I mentioned, and kind of stay, kind of deciding if they were going to stay with us or not. And you could almost, I don't know if you could see it, but you could feel that there was something that they were trying to figure out, and they were trying to figure out if this was the space where they wanted to spend some time. And you could almost feel a release or something. I can remember one girl in particular that just, like spread out. She had like a yoga mat or a blanket or something. And she just said, "Can I spread this out and just go over there by myself?" And I said, "Sure, we won't bother you." And she was over there for hours, just on that mat. Sometimes she was just looking up at the sky. Sometimes she was writing. Sometimes she was sleeping. And, there was something going on there that wasn't my business to pursue unless she wanted to share. But I just appreciated that there's a space that exists like Saint Anton where people can do that.
Well, if anybody listening wants to experience something different on their Camino, and in your words, just slow down, then Saint Anton Albergue is the place to do it. Thanks for the recommendation, Rebecca. From a favourite albergue to a favourite city, town, village, perhaps a hidden gem or a must-see somewhere along the way?
This one I'm going to go to the Le Puy route and mention Conques, which is Conques. It's this town that looks straight out of a medieval. I mean, it still looks like it probably did in the Middle Ages. It's half timbered homes and things, and I might not be using all my historical terms correctly, but if you just look up pictures of it, it looks like where you think Beauty and the Beast took place, or even other thing. It's just it's very fairy tale like. I stayed there 2 nights because I just wanted to experience the place. Some of my friends said there's nothing to do there for 2 nights, and I said, well, I'm not one of those people that needs more to do. I like to just slow down and have a day to just write as long as I want in my journal, or roam around, or talk to whoever I run into. And when I was in Conques the next day that I had decided to stay there for an extra day, they ended up having this live music festival where, I heard a 10-year-old harpist, I heard a cappella groups, I heard a guitarist. They had them in all these different little, one was in this place under the church that I never would have gone into had they not had this festival. So I think too, some of the special places that people find, it just depends on what's going on around you and who you're with and what's going on, and just listen to your intuition about where to stay a little bit longer, which towns those are for you.
So your recommendation is Conques, Conques, and while we're on the subject, I wonder if you can give us a bit of a comparison, because I've never walked the Camino Frances in France, and everyone talks about, should I say, the Camino Frances in Spain.
Yes.
What are the differences?
Well, first of all, price-wise, it's going to be a little bit more expensive because in France, a lot of people are staying in gîtes, Gites, and so it's anywhere from like 37 to 42 euros a night, but that's if you do demi-pension, so that includes dinner and breakfast. And that's another major difference is the food. If you're staying in a gîte and you're doing demi-pension, which is the way I recommend to do it, your dinner is a 4-course home-cooked French meal. The 3rd course is a cheese course, which I thought the first time I had it was going to be our dessert. Oh, they must do cheese for dessert. And the guy sitting next to me said, "Oh, no, this is the cheese course. Dessert's next." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, and it's every meal is like that. They bring out these cheeses so the food is different, the cost is different, and then also the people you're going to run into. It's mostly French folks who are doing that route. You will meet folks from other countries, but not in the same numbers that you would on the Camino Frances. And for that reason, if you don't speak French, depending on who you run into or don't, you may have a quieter experience if you don't know French, or you may run into some people that do know English and are from some other country or from France and willing to, able to speak English with you. But it's definitely a different experience in that way as well, that the nationalities of the people that you'll meet.
So the food's different, but really, really enticing by the sounds of it. it costs a bit more, but you pay for what you get as well, from what you said, and you're likely to experience a different kind of pilgrim, and predominantly they're more than likely going to be locals. They're going to be natives. Right. Okay, and in terms of the terrain, what about, is it lots of ups and downs? In general, could you give us an idea?
Well, the first couple weeks is what people had told me when I was on the Frances and I heard about the Le Puy route. They said you have to at least do the first 2 weeks, and that is mostly trails. Definitely some fair ups and downs. I always compare everything to that first day at a Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and I will say it's nothing as bad as that. But there's definitely some intense terrain in the sense of, climbing up and up and up. And to the point that I wished that I had hiking boots on that one. The Camino Frances from Saint-Jean, I tell people, you can just do, sneakers with like trail sneakers or whatever. But on that route, I felt like my trail sneakers were really not as stable as I would have liked for some of the terrain that I was going over. And it's beautiful. It's through a lot of countryside, through at least 3 towns that have been voted most beautiful villages in France, which is a designation that they seem to do every year. And there's hundreds of towns that have that designation.
And I bet the competition's high for that as well.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, it's not a piece of cake, but it's not, anything too crazy.
Well, you've sold it to me, that's for sure. And as soon as I'm able to get my walking boots on again, I definitely will put that on the radar. And I think what I took from that, one of the most important things was you mentioned the choice of footwear. So you think it would be advantageous to actually have walking boots on instead of trail runners, which will definitely, for most, get you through the Camino Frances from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port all the way to Finisterre or Santiago quite comfortably. So, okay, you mentioned food there on the Camino Frances in France, and I'm going to put you on the spot now. Can you recommend a specific eatery that pilgrims can visit along the way and should visit?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to Spain for this one. In Estella, on my most recent Camino last summer, we went to Restaurant Xanti. It's Xanti. I don't even know if I'm saying it correctly. And had the menu del dia, which was 15 euros, but it was just delicious. I had a huge slice of some sort of melon with Spanish ham over it. My dad's first course was lasagna, which in the U.S. would be like your main course. But our second course was salmon that was perfectly cooked, perfectly grilled. Then we had the dessert and the wine and the bread. And it was just not your typical pilgrim menu. It was their menu del dia, and it's not directly on the Camino. You have to go into kind of a different little section in Estella to get to it, which is good to do sometimes because you get to experience a little bit more of life on the other side versus life right on the Camino.
It's a really nice town, Estella, as well. Really, really nice town. So, yeah, it's Cafe Bar Xanti, Xanti. So make sure when you're passing through Estella, you get the menu del dia and that option there. Okay, now we're going to jump into some Camino quickies. I'm going to ask you short, sharp, sweet answers to each of these questions. Okay, so here we go. Favorite Camino blog or book?
Rebecca Scott's blogs. She's got one, mauritinoslife.blogspot.com, and then she's also got one at peaceableprojects.org.
While we're there, what about your blog?
My blog is renaissancerebecca.com, and on the right there's a whole section that says posts from the Camino, so you can read all about the different ones I've done. renaissancerebecca.com. Make sure you go there, everybody. Okay, a useful, perhaps, Camino forum or Facebook group? I like Ivar's, CaminoDeSantiago.me.
Great stuff. Favorite vlog or film?
6 Ways to Santiago.
Favorite food and or drink on the Camino?
Tinto de Verano.
Beautiful. Summer wine. Love it. One thing you wished you'd packed?
Oh, I had everything and I needed and more on my first Camino, and I would say the Camino provides.
One thing you didn't need then and wouldn't take again?
On one Camino, I brought an iPad. Wouldn't recommend it.
Unnecessary extra weight and no good for that minimalist living either. Okay. A quote or some meditations for the road?
Quote or meditations from the road. That's a tough one. I haven't thought about that one. I would,
Go on.
yeah,
Let's say take a journal. Let's go with that one.
take a journal. And everyone does their own Camino. That's
Love
my favorite.
it. Love it. I think Zara Rizvi said exactly those words a couple of episodes back. So great minds think alike. A guilty pleasure you may have carried with you?
Address.
A Camino app or internet resource?
Go to salco.com.
And how do you spell that?
GODESALCO.com. And then I go /plan, and you can put in you choose your route, starting point, ending point, and you can actually plan your Camino so you know where you can stop in between, how long it might take you.
And what was the hardest part of the Camino for you?
Leaving it.
Good answer. Yeah, I could definitely identify with that. What about your favorite thing about the Camino?
The people.
Okay, talking of the people, I think now we're going to move back into the general discussion. Often people are included in our most memorable moments on the Camino. I wonder if you can recall a funny, inspiring, perhaps quirky character or a moment that embodies everything that's good about the Camino. One of the characters you met, an unforgettable experience that was on the Camino Frances or Portuguese, or maybe when you were as Hospitalero.
I'm going to go with a Hospitalero that I met on my first Camino who I had woken up with a rash. I thought it was bed bugs. It had been a Sunday. Couldn't see a doctor, pharmacy. This was back before Camino stuff was open 24 hours. But I got to an albergue, and I didn't want to put my pack down because I thought I had bed bugs maybe, and I didn't want to spread it anywhere or anything. And this Hospitalero came out, and I explained to him, he was a Frenchman, and he didn't speak English too well, and I didn't speak Spanish too well, so we spoke in French. And he said I could put my pack down in the tiled hallway because there were no fabrics there and it would be fine. And I told him my story, and I showed him, what had my rash. Really, it was only on the upper part of my body. And he looked at it, and he went to the closet and he pulled out some papers, and he showed me these pictures, and he said, they train us about bed bugs. And he said, I don't think you have bed bugs. And he explained to me why. And he said, however, it seems like you're very nervous about this, so I am going to take everything in your pack. We have a washing machine here for the Hospitaleros to use only, and I'm going to take all your stuff and I'm going to wash it for you. And I just burst into tears, and I still get teary-eyed right now that this man would, take all this time. I mean, he sat with me as I opened up every plastic bag I had stuff in, and then I said to him, well, what about the clothes I have on? And he went up to his room and got me one of his own shirts, and he got me a fitted sheet, and he showed me how to, I could fasten it around my waist as a skirt. And so I went and changed, and I came out in this stranger's shirt and this skirt that I had made out of this bed sheet, and I took my journal and I went out, and he said, don't worry about it, I will take care of everything. And when I came back, all my stuff was hanging out in the line, and it just brought me to tears how generous this man was in helping me. He told me what the next town was, where I could get a doctor, and he was right. Turns out I didn't have bed bugs at all, but his generosity just was unreal to me.
I hope I didn't miss this when I was taking notes about what you wrote down, but where was this, this kind of hospitality and help that you get from people, from just random strangers, these random acts of kindness you get from people, is so normal on the Camino. It's the norm, not the exception, and it's wonderful that we get to experience this. And I just wonder if we can maybe give this guy a help out and find out where this albergue is.
Yes, and I did not look. I don't have it at the tip of my tongue. I will have to look it up. And I regret that I did not. I wrote down all the names of all these people. I think I was just in such a state at that point. I did not even write down who he was, and I regret it to this day. I'd love to go back to that Camino and look at their log and find out who was this guy that volunteered back then, so I could thank him. But in the meantime, I've been paying it forward.
Can you remember where it was, the exact albergue or the town? Or
yeah, I have to look it up. I can't believe I feel terrible that I don't know this.
There's no need to feel terrible. Just obviously
it was before Carrion de los Condes. because that's where I went and actually went to the doctor. It was just before that. It was a tiny little town before that.
Okay, I mean,
I
where
I can picture it. I can picture it. I just can't
so
get the name.
if you were a Frenchman around that time, somewhere around Carrion de los Condes, helping an American lady in need, then thank you very much, lovely, lovely Frenchman. And like you said, you've been paying it forward in honor of that man and inspired by that man. So that's all that matters. That's a positive karmic chain that triggered. So it's good news all round. So describe the feeling when you arrived into Santiago, and could you offer any advice how pilgrims can get the most out of that momentous day? Because it is a big day. I know many people say it, and this is very, very true, not just on a pilgrimage, but throughout life. It's all about the journey, not the destination. But how can we get the most out of that momentous arrival?
I would go back to that, Brad, about the journey, not the destination, and say to people, it's okay if when you get there, it is not the big momentous thing you thought it was going to be, because for a lot of us, it's sad. It's a you just can't even fathom what the next days are going to be like without this walking thing, without this community of people, without this Camino family. So I would say my best advice is to let the experience be whatever it is going to be for you, and be okay with whatever that experience is. For me personally, the cities on the Camino were overwhelming. I missed the quiet, the serenity, the peace of walking, of only hearing our feet on the path and our sticks clicking along. So that would be my first piece of advice. I also hear there's a great rooftop tour of the cathedral that I've never been on, but it's on my list. And to take some time there, not to rush home. I think when a lot of people plan, they just plan the number of days, and they don't realize how long it's going to take you to get back to your starting point, and so they end up having to rush around Santiago. So take some time there.
And how did you make that transition back to everyday life, especially as you'd taken a minimalist path and that kind of direction? That's often, for me, and like you said before, in the quick fire round, that was the hardest part for you. So how could you make that smooth?
Yeah, I first of all, I would recommend there's a book called Return to Camino by Alexander John Shaya that was not out when I did my first Camino, and I would highly recommend people take a look at it. He has you, because he said there's all kinds of stuff about preparing for your Camino, being on Camino, and there's not a lot written about coming back and how to handle that. And so I would recommend that book to people, and say to take some time to reflect, to write, to journal, to be quiet, to be in one place for the same few nights. I would say, friends I knew that then left to go see Paris or something were like, oh my gosh, I just couldn't even enjoy it. It just, I couldn't handle it. So just take some time, take some quiet time, whatever that looks like for you. It might not be silent, but you might just spend some time with a couple friends and just relax for a little bit when you get back, without having to jump right into your life that was pre-Camino.
And I'm intrigued because you'd obviously made a big decision to go. You'd sold all your stuff. You wanted to strip your life down to the basics. Did your life change? Was the Rebecca? I can't remember. Was your name Rebecca Gallo at the time?
It was, yes.
Okay, just because that came up on your Skype account there, and
yep.
So you were the Rebecca Gallo at the time. Mm-hmm. Was she the same Rebecca Gallo that arrived home to North Carolina?
I would say, well, I wasn't even living in North Carolina at that point. I had left New York, and after the Camino, I moved to North Carolina. And I would say it was definitely, you are who you are. You're always going to be some of, who you are to a point. But yeah, I was definitely different. It was one of those things where the things that I had saved, I looked at and I was like, what is all this stuff? Like I lived out of a backpack for 37 days. What on earth else could I possibly need? And it slowly starts to come in. So yeah, I was definitely changed, and I was also very lucky to have the opportunity to reflect on how to bring the Camino back into my life, because I had been hired to blog from my first Camino on a website called bustedhalo.com. And after that, they asked me to continue blogging for them about bringing the Camino back into my life, post Camino. And so I had this wonderful opportunity for about a year afterwards to really think about Camino in my life. And that really helped me to kind of process it and realize the changes that I had made, the things that had changed, and the things that were just, still going to be me. I'm me wherever I go.
But even though you said you hadn't done something like that before, and that wasn't a normal thing for you to do, and it wasn't even something you incorporated into your daily life, going hiking, you decided to go back again. You ended up on the Camino Portuguese, which is an amazing route. Where did you start, and how did it compare for you? And what differences are there between that and the Camino Frances, the ones that stand out? And would you recommend it?
That one was completely different. First of all, because it was unplanned. 2 days, my boyfriend at the time, now he's my husband, we had decided to spend a few months in Europe, and we got over there and I saw a sign for a cheap flight to Porto, and I was like, hey, there's a Camino that I can do from there. And 2 days later I was on the plane going to Porto. So it was very different for me too, because I chose to start out doing the coastal route, which a friend of mine had done, and I did not listen carefully enough to him when he said how very, 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 very quiet it was. I enjoy the people on the Camino, and so that one was hard for me. So I did a few days on the coastal route. It rained almost every day. At that point, the coastal route was not well marked. I've talked to people since then that said it's still questionably marked. It's great on the first day, but after that, it's a little harder. And thankfully, I just knew if I kept the ocean on my left, I was going in the right direction. So it was not the best experience for me at the time, but I think part of it was the weather and the way marking, and that, people didn't really know about that route. So then I hopped a train over to the main Portuguese route, got to Tui, and then walked on the main Portuguese route to Santiago. And that was a better experience for me because I got the Camino experience that I had thought was supposed to be the Camino experience of meeting other people from around the world and having those conversations. So I would say talk to other folks about the Portuguese, because my experience is not necessarily everybody's. I would do it differently, where I'd do it again. I don't think if I was going to do the coastal route, I'd do it with somebody else. So.
And by the sounds of it, if you are looking for a Camino that's the road less travelled, then the Camino coastal route along the Camino Portuguese coastal route could be for you. So even though you particularly didn't have the greatest experience on it, there's still some takeaways for someone that might be looking for that kind of Camino. So and how did you find it from Tui to Santiago?
Oh, that was delightful.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, at that point you're crossing over into Spain fairly quickly, so you're once, I should say, what is it? I forget how many days are actually in Spain. Anyway, and so, and like everybody, I think a lot of people have said this about some of the other routes that go into Santiago. You get lost when I was close to Santiago and I couldn't figure out how to get actually into Santiago. At one point, got a little lost, but was able to find my way again. So.
That's a long hill on the Camino Portuguese getting into Santiago for the last, I think it's like a 4-kilometer incline. It's long. It's not so steep, but it's really, really long and tiring. So it's definitely no pain, no gain when you get there. So, Rebecca, I was asked this question. I was interviewed by the Camino Cafe, Lee Brennan, last week, and I thought this was a brilliant question. So I'm going to just drop this one on you now, just before we finish. Describe the Camino de Santiago in 3 words. Tricky, I know. Put me on the spot, but I managed to come up with something.
I would say peaceful, liberating, and sacred.
Couldn't have put it any better myself. Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing all of your recommendations, for sharing your stories and all of your tips as well. It's been an absolute honour and a pleasure speaking to you. Good luck for your next Camino, whether it may be the Camino Inglés or the Del Norte, whenever it may reopen again for us all. It'll be a great day, and I just want to wish you the Camino motto, which is Ultreya, move forward with courage.
Thank you, Brad. Buen camino.